In this virtual town hall, we have invited industry leaders from across BC to share their strategies for bridging gap and building trust. Those critical keys to safe and thriving culture will encourage, we will encourage you today to ask questions and maybe probe your thoughts, discuss these items today. Please use the Q&A icons at the bottom of the screen to ask questions at any time during the session today. So today it's my pleasure to introduce our panelists. Amit Chambra from Hanson Industries, Martine McGeorge from Slimline Manufacturing, and our own Dr. Steve Conway. So welcome, everyone. So maybe we'll just take a minute to let you introduce yourselves and share briefly why you think it is important to have safety culture that encourages dialogue and input from its employees. So welcome, everyone.
Nice to be here.
Thank you.
Hello.
My apologies. I had things loading on my screen here. So welcome. And maybe we'll start with you, Amit. Maybe tell us why you think it's important to have safety culture that encourages dialogue and input to its employees.
Oh, without safety, what can happen, Wayne? It's a kind of a from a top level. You say profit first or safety first. So it's chicken or egg. I would say safety first. Safety is the place. If you make your place safe enough, if your employees feel safe enough to come to the work, I think all those things follow what you are looking for. It improves employee retention and morale, reduce workplace incidents, and lower costs. So safety is always paramount for us, and that's what we consider. We try to make sure our place is safe enough for our team members to work.
Great. Thank you, Amit. Martine.
For myself, encouraging open communication is fundamental for both safety and trust amongst our employees. When people are feeling heard, they're more likely to speak up at the first onset of a small problem instead of letting those smaller issues build and build until we have a pretty serious or unsafe situation at hand. Building that trust helps me create a workplace where people are feeling both physically and mentally safe. And then people are always going to feel confident that when they do bring something up, it is being dealt with quickly and it's going to lead to long lasting change across our entire company.
That's great. Thanks, Martine. And lastly, Steve, what about your thoughts on this?
Well, I mean, I think that, safety is a fundamental right. When people show up for work in the morning, they should expect that they can go home in the same condition, hopefully even better condition than when they showed up in the morning. So I think when organizations focus on safety, what they're doing is they're signaling to their employees, but they're also signaling to their customers that, hey, we want to be in an environment where people can thrive. And, when people aren't safe, they're distracted. When people don't feel safe, they're worried, they're distracted. And actually that increases the likelihood that people are going to get hurt even more. Right. So this one is for either Martine or Amy, whoever wants to go first. But what are some examples of things that you do to demonstrate to employees that their safety concerns and suggestions are valued? So, and following that, like what results have you seen by doing that?
Uh, for for me, I would say I encourage employees to bring forward any safety concern or suggestions without a fear of retaliation. It's not the policy where shoot the messenger. Safety is kind of heard or taken seriously. Open door policy, and I make a point to listen actively and respond constructively. We have a formal system where employees can submit their safety ideas or concern anonymously preferred. These are reviewed regularly by safety team and management, and actionable items are followed upon properly. And when employees suggest improvement that enhance safety, uh, we at a Hanson in our meetings, crew meetings or huddle, we acknowledge their contribution, whether it can be through thank you notes, shootouts, recognition, or some gift cards. Because without them speaking, I think it's hard for us to improve. We can do so much, but real magic happens when the thoughts or the ideas come from the flow.
Mm-hmm. So, I mean, it sounds like, again, that idea that communication is key. If you
Yeah.
want a safer environment, you really have to foster an environment where employees feel that they can communicate safely their ideas. But it's also a bi-directional approach. Both sides
Yeah.
have to communicate actively. So, Martine, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I definitely agree. Like communication is so important and key in any organization. When someone raises a safety concern, one of the most important things I do as well is to make sure there's follow-up and that it's clear and it's consistent and it's visible for everyone. I don't just say thank you and move on with my day. I keep them updated on the actions that are being taken, loop back with them directly, and try to get that employee involved with the solution as well. This shows we're not just listening, but we're acting and taking their input to make a difference in the organization. And similar to Amit, I want to make sure it's easy for people to voice their concerns. So we have a multitude of channels that they could come to. They can talk to myself directly, any of our joint health and safety committee team members, their supervisors, and working on submitting like an anonymous feedback as well. Kind of just finding a way to meet the employee where they're at and where they're comfortable because they're not going to come to you otherwise.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then beyond that, I use daily walkabouts. I'm on our production floor very frequently, just chatting and talking with the employees, just to really build that relationship with each of them so that when the time comes or they have any questions or concerns, maybe I'm just walking by and they feel, oh, that's a really great time to let me know of it. And so just again, meeting them where they're at.
Interesting. So accountability is part of that process, so if what I'm hearing you say, when employees have a concern, they bring it to you, you don't just take it in and drop it, you actually act on it in a way that shows them, hey, we're taking this seriously, right?
Absolutely.
And consistency in doing that. But you also mentioned the importance of building trust, right? Without trust, what do you see when you don't have trust with your employees? They don't talk to you.
Yeah. Maybe
Ab-
flipping
So,
this back to you, Steve. What do
okay.
you see as some of the best or key practices in shaping a safety culture?
Well, I mean, Martina and me spoke to a great number of them, but one of the things, first of all, you need to have leadership commitment.
Yeah.
It has to be something that the employees see is a priority for their leadership. Because if it doesn't have that, that typically it fizzles out pretty quickly. The idea of clear communication, it has to be a bi-directional. So not only should the employer be speaking about their priorities and safety to the employees, but the employees have a really important voice because they're the ones that are out there in that environment. So their voice has to be heard and acted on.
Yeah.
Obviously, you need an environment of psychological safety where you can make it, where an employee can make a mistake. And let's face it, we don't always like the mistakes that are made. They can be pretty costly. But when an employee makes a mistake and it's the tone and attitude of the employer. Is it a mistake where is the idea, how do we learn from this? It's that idea, forget the mistake, remember the lesson. Do we learn from this? Are we positively reinforcing the things that we want to see? Not just looking for the infractions, but when I see positive behavior, am I saying, hey, you know what? I noticed you did that. That's fantastic. Keep doing more of it. And I think it has to be integrated within, the daily operations. It has to be integrated within the strategy of that organization for it to really stick.
I like this question that we have around leadership role modeling. And Steve and Amit, I'm maybe going to bend on you guys. Just, like, how do we influence this as leaders, the behavior across an organization? I mean, this is a really important part because we're the what people look at. And so, what is your guys's how do your thoughts on how do leaders impact and influence those behaviors?
I think I would start with Wayne talking about walk the talk. If just you are talking about safety and you're not following yourself, what impression you are giving to your team. So leadership behaviors set the standard for the entire team. what leaders do, uh, uh, whether we reward or ignore, that becomes a blueprint for others to behave positive. Like example, I will give you. Sometimes myself, I forgot to wear my PPE and just want, in a curiosity, see what's happening on the floor. And somebody on the floor comes to me and he will tell me, "Boss, you are not wearing your safety jacket, or your shoes are not there." That tells me, oh wow, that system is working well. Whether now I say, do I care? Yes, I do care. The person has informed me I'm not taking the right steps. So listening to the feedback, holding people accountable, promoting this strong, ethical, and safe working culture, I think it's very important. And on the flip side, if same myself, I can show the poor leadership behavior, which can normalize the risky habits and weaken the compliance. So coming back to the thing where I started, it's walk the talk, which is very important to me.
Yeah, I
And
think that's a really important thing to emphasize, that the power of role modeling. Employees are watching their leaders all the time, even when leaders think they're not being watched. So, and employees take their cues. The leaders, they shape the tone, the emotional tone. Is it a tone? Is it one where employees feel trust that they can actually speak up or follow their leader, or is it one where leadership creates a culture of fear? And we know that closes people down, so they become more unsafe. But I think it's also important, like whatever, what leaders prioritize or ignore, that tells employees all they need to know. So, Amit's, comment about going out on the floor, obviously Amit has set a tone there where employees feel like they can go up to the boss and say, hey, you're not wearing your PPEs. And Amit's tone to that is, thanks for reminding me, that's great, rather than coming down on them. So that kind of setting that tone, prioritizing what's important. And again, being psychologically safe, listening to and actively building trust is a key. You can't do it without that.
I like the example that Amit gives, and I go a little bit further. It's if you're a production person, a manufacturing person, right, getting out on that floor, right, to what you said, Steve, ignoring certain things. What it sets the tone of priority. If you walk by and safety is ignored, and we just want production, right? A lot of the times, we're pushing for production, we're pushing to meet customer deadlines, etc., and we ignore that the guard is in place, or we ignore that a person may be putting themselves in a compromising position or area. And do we ignore that as leaders because we think that that customer deadline is it's so important that we can just maybe bypass it today? Or and again, that will set a tone, especially with young workers, new workers in the workforce. And so I think that we as leaders, we are in that glass house, and it's
Mhm.
important that we model that well. And just when we think nobody is looking, they really are looking. So I like the examples here. Maybe further to that, how do we hold leaders accountable to this modeling of behaviors so that employees do feel free to speak up to what you said there, Meet? I mean, hey boss, you're not wearing your PPE. Is there any other examples where you think that modeling and holding us leaders, accountable to our behaviors are kind of shown?
I would say setting up the clear expectation, whether we are talking about safety in our boardroom regarding the topics, measuring behavior, providing feedback, and reinforcing this positive action. The another example which comes to mind when is like when we go on a road, I'm everyone is goes to work and they see on the road signs, your mom and dad works here. So what does that mean? Like same, if I'm comfortable bringing my kids to work here at Hanson, that tells me like I want same standard for my kids, for my family, which I want to have for my employees. So having those clear expectations, and by embedding these practices like of thinking about the safety first, which is a paramount, into the leadership development and performance management, uh, I think That's how I feel I can hold myself and my leaders accountable for the behavior to make employees feel safe and respected.
Steve, from your perspective, I mean, how do you see it? You go into a lot of organizations, and how do you set the tone with leaders around role modeling?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really interesting question because, I don't think it's a secret that many people who become leaders have never actually had any training in how to be leaders. They have those competencies. They have the technical skill, and then they're thrust into a leadership role, and then they realize, oh my goodness, I've got to work with people. This isn't what I signed up for, right? And so I think when we're promoting people, when we're selecting people to move up, when we're hiring people, we want to make sure that psychological safety or emotional intelligence is one of those competencies that we're looking for, not just their ability to do the technical pieces of the job. Once they're in, we need to measure it. Are we using surveys or feedback or even 360s to assess like what the climate is? How are people perceiving their leader? Are they seeing this leader as somebody who's safe, as somebody who's role modeling? Because these 360s will give you very, very powerful feedback on things that you might not see in yourself. I think it has to be incorporated into performance reviews. Make psychological safety a KPI that leaders are measured against. And we've got the very top leaders have to model it, but we also have to make sure that if there's a deficit in the skill set, are we providing that training? Are we providing coaching? Are we providing feedback to help that manager develop those skills? Without that, it's going to be really hard to do.
Yeah, I think this is where we see this a little bit of a deficit in the workplace because, Steve, you and I have talked about it. I mean, you and I have even talked about it where, we do have that, individuals that show that bit of spark that they can accomplish and do tasks really well. And then we say, great, they'll be a great leader without really evaluating really any other part of that kind of thought. And we put them in a leadership role and we just, shove them in the water and we hope they swim. And some swim well and some don't. And then we kind of clean that up as we go along. But if we really kind of think about that as this is an opportunity to really, to your point, Steve, create a 360 review, really look at whether that person is, do they get some training? Do they get some coaching? Because there is the foundational things that really set a person up to be a good leader in the future. And I want to go to the next question around encouraging
Oh,
employee
sorry, could I
voices.
add something?
Of course.
Yeah, so I just wanted to build off a little bit of what Stephen Amit was saying. Um, that I totally agree that you need to set those clear expectations right from the start, whether you're internally promoting someone or hiring someone externally, that expectation needs to be laid during that onboarding process. And a strong leader is going to lead from the front. So you need somebody who understands that they're not just going to sit at the back and bark the orders, because
Mm.
employees are going to reflect the behaviors that their leaders demonstrate, whether they're good or bad.
Right.
So I think a lot of times leaders aren't quite aware of that our employees are always watching, waiting, learning, seeing what's acceptable, what's unacceptable. So the leaders have to hold themselves to the highest standards. And I know in our industry, it's very common, like mentioned, that tradespeople who've been excellent in their role get thrusted into that leadership position with no training. And so I know for myself personally, I'm working on like an internal training program that will work with using the people from the floor to the front line of leadership, giving them those tools to succeed, to encourage like openness and trust. And the accountability, like we can't just be pointing out with the leaders what's wrong if we haven't given them the tools to be successful. So by giving them that leadership training, the clear expectations, follow throughs, ongoing coaching, not just 30, 60, 90 days. We're talking, semi-annually, annually, and just continuously giving them that feedback, then we can help our leaders succeed and create a safe and respectful environment.
I think these are great, great, answers. And this is where I'm gonna go a little rogue on all of you. This is great. But let's face it, and Martine and Meet, you run organizations, and look, you're faced with pressures. You're faced with production pressures. You're faced with the fact that you're missing people due to sickness, illness, etc. So you're typically running, one, two, three, maybe more people in deficit. All those daily pressures on you running organizations. When we talk about coaching, that usually gets kind of, oh, I'll deal with it tomorrow. I'll deal with that next week. I'll deal with it that next month. But how do you get it right back up in front as a priority when you're facing all those other pressures? And then now we add in tariffs, and now we add in, recession words and all these other things. These are real life challenges in plants. How do you stay focused enough to make sure that the coaching is happening, that daily reflection is happening, you're modeling good behavior? Because let's face it, as leaders, we got stuff coming from all over the place and conflicting priorities. So I throw it back to you guys. How do you deal with that?
Well, I know for myself, the first thing is, and with any strong leader, is you need to know when to delegate. So if there's a task that somebody else can handle, and so that I can handle the coaching, the training, the follow-up, then I need to delegate that task. And sometimes for leaders, that can be hard to do, to give away that little bit of control. But overall, you need to outsource that. And then the other thing I'll do is, for feedback and coaching, I schedule it in the calendar. Like, it is the top of mind, important meeting, whether treat it like a meeting with a CEO, and I cannot miss it. And so if I don't time out that block of in my schedule, then it won't happen. You'll, like you said, push it aside, push it aside. But yeah, I preset everything in that calendar, so I make sure I obey by it. So
It's a great thing. I like that. It's a meeting with the CEO. I got to be there. It's a doctor's appointment. I can't miss it. I got to be there, right? Setting that hard line, timeline. Amit, how about yourself?
So Wayne, you're putting us in a very odd spot here by asking this question about the deadlines and how you skip the processes and you try to skip the process. I would say safety isn't delegated; it's lived. So yes, onboarding covers most of the things, but obviously there can be a times where meeting the deadlines, you need to move people around, but the basic training is there, basic common sense is there, the basic environment is there. If you are not feeling safe, raise hand. Don't work. Buddy system is there. You need to talk. You need to express. Don't just do it because you have been asked to do it. So, like emphasizing clearly on regular basis, whether it's in crew meeting or huddles, about the safety and well-being of the employees, it creates that kind of a system where that like employees feel, yes, I'm being looked after.
Yeah.
I'm not just being thrown into the river and just start swimming by yourself. There is someone looking, watching me, where, like Martin said, delegating someone, or there is a buddy system where the risk and all the things are being properly judged before you put that person on that place. If it's not there, you have to make sacrifices. The deliveries got late. It's not you. You don't make your customer unhappy. Like it happens, it's manufacturing, but we have to see our risk. We have to see what's pros and cons are to have any untrained employee working on that machine. So I think there is a risk assessment for everything before you make those decisions. You can't just
Thank you.
send anyone.
But
Yeah,
I
no,
also
those.
think, if somebody, let's say it is a busy environment and you're running behind and you do take those shortcuts, you you have an employee get hurt, and it can be a serious injury. What happens to that assembly? It gets shut
Yeah.
down, right?
Yeah.
So if you think about it from a savings perspective, it's far more expensive to run an unsafe organization, not to mention the human toll that it takes.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, it's
And
just, I think it's a good question to ask because I know a lot of leaders struggle with, balancing the priorities. But I think to your point, if you've got good foundation, you make it a priority. I think this is where organizations can be
and
successful.
I will add, on a regular basis, we do work on like backup plans. who can be backup if this person or that person is there. So we can't just live on one person running the machine or one person. Like we want to be an organization which is process control, not people control.
Right.
So that motivates us to just keep looking for the ways how we can make sure the plant is running in different circumstances.
Interesting. That's great. Maybe going a little bit deeper into the people side of things. I mean, how do you get input from people who are reluctant to speak up? Like this is a real thing. And so maybe Martine, you can give us maybe some thoughts on that.
Perfect. This is right in my wheelhouse.
Yeah.
So one of the most effective ways that I have found has been informal day-to-day conversations with your employees. Remove the work side out of it, get onto the floor and talk to them like people. Have the conversations. How was your weekend? What are your plans? What are you looking forward to? A lot of people might think it seems like a small gesture, but really what you're doing is you're letting your employee know that you are invested in them. You want to hear about what excites them. And with that, you're building a solid relationship. And with that relationship is going to come trust and open communication. And by laying that really solid foundation, you're having that employee know subconsciously that you are there to hear. And so when they do come up with an issue or have a concern or a suggestion for an improvement, they're far more likely now to talk to you about it.
Yeah.
And maybe they're not going to follow any of the formal channels, which I know for myself, a lot of the people we have downstairs, they won't.
Right.
So by putting myself on that floor, I make myself readily available, and everyone knows that they can come to me about anything. And it's been really successful thus far. We have some very long-standing employees here who otherwise maybe wouldn't buy in as much with some of the company culture
Yeah.
or even just the communication. And I've had them been involved with multiple projects now, and they get excited and they just wanted to feel that kind of connection and that we see them as a person, not just that employee who's here to clock in for their 7 to 3 shift.
I like that the approach is very authentic, where you can, people can feel your human side of you and that it's not just merely something you say, but this is a real authentic action on your behalf.
Absolutely, because if you're not authentic, people see right through that.
Yeah.
So it's one thing for me to tell you to go onto the floor and ask somebody how their weekend was, but if you actually don't care how their weekend was, they
Yeah.
will pick up on that. So
Yeah.
make sure that whatever you do, you are doing authentically and that you're invested in them. Our people make our organization. I mean, we really can't do anything without them. So they need to be valued and appreciated.
Martine
That's
says
great.
something really interesting that's kind of a key about human beings. Everybody's got a PhD in BS detection. We all
Yeah.
know when somebody's BSing us. And when
Oh,
we
yeah.
see that, we immediately stop trusting that person.
Yeah, and there's something so much in a name, when you know someone's name, when you take that action of, knowing who that person is and addressing them by their name and asking them more of those authentic personal questions, that's where that bridge of trust comes in. And I think that is the key thing that needs, you hear a lot of employees will say, well, I don't trust you and I need to, you need to earn my trust. Okay, that's a fair statement. But it's a two-way street, right? So again, this authenticness exchange back and forth, I think is a real key part of humanizing our workplaces. Amit, your thoughts?
Uh, my thoughts, I would say Martin has very good points regarding going on the floor and being authentic. So for me, there has been days or the weeks where I have not been on the floor, but earlier it was not the case. I was on the floor daily and just working with the people on a day-to-day basis. But what how I have changed that is I have built up a team which I have handpicked people, right people on the right spots. So the people who are hesitant to speak up, like whether it's me going after a week or so, the people like whether it's a lack of confidence or the past negative experience or there is a language barrier, how we can overgo all those things by creating a multiple layers of feedback. You have your lead hand, you have your supervisor, you have your manager, or you have your HR manager. So those kind of multiple pathways, building the trust, talking about openly in our toolbox meetings or something, and ensuring the responses are meaningful and respectful. And I think that's how we have made our people to speak up. And I believe encouraging input from the people who are hesitant to speak up requires strategies that build trust, reduce barriers, and create safe space. Otherwise, they are not going to say. If they don't see anything happening, they say, "Oh, the same place, nothing is going to happen. No need of giving feedback." So breaking all those barriers has helped to make those people speak up.
You raise a really interesting point because, I mean, some organizations, they're so big that it would be impossible for the CEO to know everybody.
Yeah.
But then I think then the important part is, making sure that the team leads you have, the supervisors, the managers, that they're selected specifically when you hire them and you train them to be that kind of person that Martine was describing, going out on the floor, having authentic conversations, developing that sense of mutual trust. So even though the CEO might not be able to do it in their day-to-day, they're hiring and ensuring that the people that are in those roles do that kind of work.
I think, Steve, that's a really good point because I think and Martina, I'm going to ask you a question on this from an HR lens. I mean, when you really, and I kind of look at the organization as a football field, when you really look at that football field and you're looking for those key people in there's skill sets, obviously, but when you're looking for people leaders, I mean, how important is that when you're looking at your overall organization? That to Steve's point, that you're looking at those key people that are going to be in those different departments are going to kind of bring that whole organization together. Is that something that you're thinking about all the time, or kind of repositioning yourself as opportunities for changing of employees out happen where people leave, and how do you deal with that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think those key players are so important. They're invaluable. And I think the biggest thing with that too is sometimes people kind of put blinders on who they think a key player is or what they should demonstrate and how they should be. But I actually find because every single person is so individual, you need to have key players that represent different kind of employees as well.
Mm.
So I know for us right now, we're going through a little bit of some changes where we're looking at adding some more key players in there. And my suggestion to our operations manager was actually three people who all have very different personalities, but could together kind of bring that whole floor together. So you'd have a person who's, maybe a little bit more reserved, level-headed, quite methodical in their thinking. You have somebody who's the high energy golden retriever of a company who's gets people excited. And then you have somebody else who's just one of those people that every single person respects their work ethic. And now you take those three people and you unite them into one team or supervisory team. Well, you've covered every basis. So even if one individual technically reports to one supervisor, but they connect maybe emotionally better with somebody else, they have that opportunity to go and talk to that person instead. And so it kind of will really fill that communication gap that can happen on the floor between upper management and your production workers. So I think you can't, you have to pick people on the personalities, but you also need to have a well-balanced group of them.
I think it's so critical. I mean, having been in a number of organizations over the years, you can really start to pick out that imbalance, where we kind of pick for one particular thing. We just need a skill, and we forget some of those other parts that are so important in balancing the organization to make sure they all work together well. So thanks for sharing that. That's great. I mean, going back to you just for a second, because I want to dig into things around safety culture. But when we start to look at how we're doing, like, are we measuring to say, look, how effective have our efforts been around building trust and open communication? Do you have a metric or do you have some way of measuring your organization's overall effectiveness in the work that you do in developing your safety culture of trust?
I would say yes, I can speak about the metrics, but how we see these programs are working. I can say is from a big picture. If there are reduced workplace incident, if it's lower cost, if it's good employer retention and morale in the company, improved reputation, compliance with regulation, higher productivity. So seeing those things, but how talking about the metrics which finally make you see all these results are like we do have near miss report, claimable accidents, minor accident, time lost, warning letter, and safety committee walkabout, and those results on the regular basis, like those are presented to the management to see how we are doing things. Are we improving? Are we going down? How our programs are working?
Perfect, perfect. We'll probably dig a little bit more into that because again, I think overall program effectiveness has to really be looked at. I mean, I'm a big encouragement of changing up your culture surveys, right? We are our own organization, we're changing ours up because we want to probe into different areas to see how effective we are. So we'll come back a little bit more. Steve, I want to really kind of dig in a little bit about from your perspective. What are indicators of strong safety culture? I mean, this is a big passion button for both you and I, and I really want to kind of get your perspective on this.
Yeah, I mean, there's a number of them. I think obviously the first one is you have a group, you have employees who feel safe to speak up about their concerns, right? If they see something, they know they can raise it without fear. And it's that idea, if we've probably all made mistakes in our careers, maybe sometimes they were big, maybe they were small, but we've all probably had those bosses who, when you make that mistake, they come down on you like a ton of bricks. And if that mistake was one where safety was concerned, and we get lambasted, the odds are that we in the future we might not say something again. The odds are anybody who watched that interaction won't say anything. And so what by that approach, by coming down heavy-handed on somebody who made a mistake, what we've done is we've actually made the environment far more unsafe because people won't speak. So shaming and blaming never works. And that kind of is part of proactively reporting. People will, they'll near misses and hazards. Again, those things are reported without fear. And sometimes what you see when you start kind of making a shift around making it more psychologically safe, you might actually see an increase. You're thinking, whoa, we're having more near misses here. What's going on? You're probably not having more near misses. You're having more near misses reported, right? And so that actually gives you data to make improvements to the situation. Martine and I mean, you talked about like that leadership visibility. Are they part of the safety efforts, or are the leaders? So I mean, I'm a big fan. Leaders have to delegate, but leaders can't delegate everything. This idea about safety, you're the leader, the CEO, the president, they have to be the main cheerleader for safety. And if they're just delegating all those efforts to everybody beneath them, that sends a very clear message. It's, we have to think, employees encourage people to see it as, this is, sometimes you'll hear people say, well, that's not my job. Well, we want an environment where everybody says, safety is my job. No matter where I see it, if I see it in a colleague, I'll say something. If I see it in my president or CEO, if I see a meat coming down, not wearing his PPEs, I'll say it. We're all feel responsible for everybody else's well-being so that they go home. And I think, just changing our mindset about what mistakes are. Yeah, mistakes can be costly. Mistakes, we don't want mistakes, but mistakes are learning opportunities. So if we kind of reorient the mindset of the organization that, mistakes lead to improvements, not to blame, those are the kind of things that you'll see in organizations that have that strong safety culture.
I couldn't
I want to
agree
do
more.
Oh,
If I could just add one thing is,
sure.
I know for myself, I've worked with numerous leaders over my career, some that were far more impactful than others. But one of the things that, as an employee, I immediately have just that much more respect for that leader is when that leader can say, hey, I made a mistake. This one's on me. And here's how I'm going to fix it. And that just really sets the tone of, if your leader can admit to the mistake that they made, which again, like Steve mentioned, we all have made them, And it's how you choose to learn and grow from that mistake, and have it so that your employees do feel confident to say, I made this mistake, can you help me, or how can we fix this and prevent it from happening again? And I think that is immenseful compared to just shaming people for making those errors.
Absolutely. I give an example. Steve and I were just at a conference, and CEO of a large power corp from the Eastern United States had shared an example of how for years they would use these man lifts that go from multiple floors within a power generation plant. And these things were basically running on a belt, and there's little steps on it. And they would just reach out, step on the thing, and it would take them from floor to floor. And it was pretty widely used in all of these power plants. And then she had ended up leaving this one power plant and went to another power plant. And they were taking the stairs up into various parts of the power plant. And she said, "Well, don't you have a man lift here?" And they said, "Oh no, well, we got rid of those a long time ago. They were one of our leading causes of injury and near misses of from even for fatality if somebody fell off of it." And she said, "You took them out?" And they said, "Yeah, it was a big expense, but we took action and took them out because they were such a huge risk to our employees." Years later, she returned back, as the story goes, to the company she used to be with, where they still had these man lifts. And she turned around, and within a very short period of time, I think it was within a few weeks of being back, she had ordered them to all be removed from these power plants. And there was huge complaints from the unions and from other groups within saying this is going to, slow us down. I'm out of shape. I can't climb stairs. It's going to cost us too much to put in elevators. And she says, "I don't care. We need to remove the risk." And it's such a profound comment. And slowly, people actually wanted her job, saying, "Oh, get rid of her. She should be here as a leader." But I thought it was a great example of where leaders step into the gap, and they'll take the knocks on the chin. They'll do what's right, even though there is a large cost. There's a large human cost, of course, to your ego, maybe to your reputation. But in the end, she wanted to eliminate that, potential risk for death and certainly for injury. So it's an example. It's really resonated with me, and I think it's an important part of where leaders can really, unite an organization as well by taking a stand on different issues.
But she also importantly she had to reevaluate and be open to saying, you know what, the way I used to do things was wrong.
Yeah,
And, and that's a tough thing to do, to show that kind of humility when you're in those leadership roles.
yeah, that's a key point. Martine, going back to you, can you share an example, a time when an employee's suggestion or a voice concern led to a significant positive change in safety practices within your company? I want to hear some examples.
Absolutely, actually. I just had a recent one in the last few weeks, so it's perfect for that. Our inventory supervisor on the floor, he had mentioned that there had been an increase in visitors or staff for getting their high vis vests when they're on their way into our yard. So for getting their full PPE. So with that, they would have to be reminded, sent back onto the production floor, get the high vis vest, come back out, which could cause obviously some delays, let alone, and more importantly, create a safety hazard, as we have forklifts, trucks, everything going around in that yard. So based on that feedback, I made a very simple but effective change. I installed hooks right by the door there and hung up the vests. So you cannot miss them on your way out. So if you are missing them, you are choosing to look past them at that point. And then just to take it a step further, I also I used one of our spare lockers on our production floor and made it a PPE locker. So it's signed, it has it written out there what's all in that locker. So any visitor or staff, if they've forgotten something at home, can go into that locker to get, the spare steel toe covers, safety glasses, hearing protection, high vis vests, anything that they need is in that location to be used and hopefully returned after. It seemed like a small fix, but it created a huge improvement. One, that employee who is newer to our company, um, was able to see that his feedback immediately related to an immediate change and improved our safety culture across our company. So I can't speak for him, but I know if that was me, I would feel quite honored and heard and valued and appreciated from that. And then it also just really reiterates that culture of speak up if you say something, because we can make those changes. And sometimes it's something as simple as he saw something, he noticed it, he brought it to my attention.
Yeah.
Whereas afterwards, when I had gone onto the floor and talked to everybody to let them know as well, I mean, I sent out an email, but not everyone reads emails. So I went onto the floor and personally told everybody about those changes as well. And I was shocked that, there was one other person who had mentioned, oh, yeah, I noticed that a while ago. And my thought was, this is somebody who didn't feel confident to speak up yet.
Yeah.
So then that opened up that conversation for me to have with them, like, oh, like, could I make myself more available, or is there a different channel you would prefer? You can always bring anything up to me, and kind of just leave it there and use that as a training tool as well.
That's great. Yeah, and I think that's validating, right? When people see that you've actioned their suggestions, that creates a whole new meaning to trust, right?
Absolutely. And you
Right?
need to
Things
action
get
it
done.
quickly.
Absolutely. Going a little bit further on that, have you found ways to assess your workplace culture? I mean, how safe do your employees feel to contribute their voices, their suggestions?
So that's something that I'm constantly developing, working on, trying to build and tweak, because I think you need to, just as individual every person is, you need to have so many different tools to measure. So there's some of the most effective insights I get aren't always the formal surveys or the even the 360 surveys. It's usually from those regular informal conversations again. I mean, I say it over and over again, but having that relationship with those staff, I get so much useful feedback. My daily walkabouts give me a chance to check in with those employees, casual, non-intimidating, because some people just immediately freeze up if they're given the piece of paper to fill out, or they're asked to come and sit into a meeting and they're just thinking, I mean, nobody wants to get called into a meeting with HR.
Right.
So I don't want to immediately put those walls up. So by meeting them where they're at, I'm getting so much valuable feedback on what can I do better to adjust my approach to each employee, because you need to meet them where they're at and not expect them to always come to you.
Yeah.
Beyond that, though, we are building more useful tools as well, structured ones like anonymous check-ins, and then to check patterns and give employees just a lot of different ways to report any or bring up any concerns, because it's never going to be a one size fits all.
Great. I think there's a lot of great stuff there, and thanks for that, Martine. Meet, I'm going to switch gears just over to you we're getting close to the bottom of the hour here, and I want to give us time to get into Q&A. Um, how do you balance the need for productivity with the importance of actively listening and addressing safety culture concerns, even if it means, and you talked about it, even if it means slowing down production or letting that customer know that you're going to be late?
Uh, I think the balancing the need. Huh, that's I think you might have heard the term called "we have done always this way,"
Yeah,
right? So that's a common practice, and whenever you are trying to change that, all that new can of worm opens. So
yes,
yeah, so balancing the needs for productivity with the importance of safety and active listening is, I think, one of the important responsibility of the leadership. And in my experience, uh, safety and productivity are not at odds when managed well. There has been a time where operational pace, must be adjusted to ensure safe outcomes.
yeah,
And I don't view safety and productivity as competing priorities. Like people used to show me a triangle. You have a quality, you have a lead time, and you have a cost. Like choose either one of them. What you want first? You want good lead time, you have to pay more. You want less lead time, you have to compromise on quality, you have to pay more cost. But safety is, it's a non-compromisable. Even in the lean also world, they came up with the 6S safe.
yeah,
like from where in the lean world came the safety. So
Right.
I don't view safety and productivity like as competing, but I see safety as the foundation that enables sustainable productivity. By embedding safety into planning, empowering our employees, and communicating its long-term value,
Yes.
the culture is created where people are confident and leaders can make those decisions that protect both people and performance.
I will go on the record to say there is no 6S. It is
Yeah,
only 5S.
that's what I am surprised. Like from where these lean guys
Only
come and they will,
5S.
yeah, yeah,
Safety is incorporated in all 5 of the S's. So yes,
yeah.
I appreciate that. Martine, did you want to comment on this? I thought you. No.
Oh,
Okay.
no, I was just agreeing with him. I thought that
Okay.
was excellent that, yeah, you can't compromise on safety. It needs to be top of mind.
I'd like that, Amit, in the sense that, when you sit there and say that it is a foundation, right? It is not one of those paradigms of, I'm going to choose one over the other. And I think that that is sometimes, the challenge that leaders are faced with. Look, you have to choose quality over cost or over efficiency, and all three can be considered at the same time. You don't have to exclude one to get the other. And I think that safety, if it's the foundation, ultimately it'll lead your organization to be able to find other ways to meet any of those other goals. So, lastly, Amit, next steps. What next steps are you planning to strengthen your culture and build trust within your team? Oh, I think you're muted.
Sorry. Uh,
No worries.
I would say it's an ongoing journey. We learn from each other, and I think MSA, I would say, it's an important part in this journey, which shows us what's available in the market, what we are doing, the audits you guys do for us. So we need to just make sure our team is proactive, self-aware, and committed to continuous improvement in the culture and trust building. Uh, uh, like if we strengthen our culture and build deeper trust with our team, that's what I think should is our ongoing priority. And based on the feedback we receive, the lessons we learn, we need to enhance our culture. But if you particularly ask me, Amit, what exactly you are going to do? No, I mean, I don't have any answer. It is kind of ongoing. We learn from each other and just implement what the best practices are available in the industry.
We like to put you on the hot seat at least once. Perfect. No, thanks very much. Maybe what we can do is we're just coming down to the bottom of 11:30 here, and I want to give an opportunity for each of our panelists um, to maybe give their final thoughts before we go into Q&A. So, what would you like to share with our audience around this conversation about safety culture and trust before we go into Q&A? So maybe I'll start with you, Martine.
Yeah, if there's one thing I've learned is trust is built in those small moments. It's not the big grand gestures, the big presentation where, everyone leaves rah 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 about it. It's those everyday small moments, those daily conversations, follow-ups, showing people that when they speak up, it does lead to action. In human resources, I have the opportunity to make that a reality, not just write policies that people read and get bored with and tuck away and never look at again, but by helping people feel seen, feel heard, supported, validated, and most importantly, appreciated. And with that, it helps build that positive culture where you spend so much of your time coming to work. And sure, I know for myself, I would love to be spending it like on a beach somewhere instead of coming into work, but at least I know I'm coming into a place where the culture lifts my spirits. I feel welcomed. Enjoy my interactions with everybody, and I hope everyone else does as well. Because culture isn't just what we say it is. You can say, oh, we have a great culture, but it's really what we consistently do that portrays that culture for everybody. And it's how people feel about it and talk about it when no one's there in a leadership or management role to actually hear it. It's what happens behind closed door. That's what your real culture is.
Mhm.
Excellent.
Nicely said.
Thank you very much. Amit, yourself.
Yeah, I will piggyback on what Martin said. Consistency plus transparency equal to trust, and trust drives safety, and safety drives performance. So, safety isn't about the rules or procedures; it's about people. Even like mistake happens, whatsoever you come up with, there will be always something which you never imagined and it happened. But it's how safety culture you have built, not on fear, but on trust, the communication and respect. So the strong culture starts with the psychological safety, knowing you can speak up, ask question, share ideas without fear of judgment or shooting the messenger. So it is expected, it's not just encouraged.
That's great. Thanks, Amit. I like that. Steve, any rounding thoughts from your perspective?
Well, after Martina and Amit kind of weighed in, they've kind of stolen any thunder might have had. But, I think that we just want to always remember, that developing trust is not a one and done, right? Trust is ongoing, and trust is also very fragile. It takes a lot longer to build trust than it takes to lose it. So we always have to be mindful every single day. When we're leaders, we're showing up. What am I doing today intentionally to ensure that people feel safe? That builds trust.
Yeah, I totally agree. It's you don't get a day off, right? We all have bad days, but you don't really get a day off. And I think it's how we show up every single day to reinforce that. And I think all three of you have really given us some great key thoughts and some takeaways here on that. So, with that, I'm going to shift gears with us, and we're going to take some live questions from the audience. And so, sorry, this is where the scripts go away, and we get to play with some fun ones. So, Meet, you're on deck first. So, going back to your first response to the very first question, one of the questions uh, that we've got here is they like the idea of anonymous submission. How do you do this? And is it done paper, online? And what do you do if there's not enough information? Do you seek for more information?
Yeah, this is interesting. And there has been time when you said about do they write, do they um, type in or send you email? If it's anonymous, there is always a fear of, oh, they will notice my handwriting or my email address. So what should I do? So we have done is we have QR codes where you go on, just scan the QR code and just send your response there. And obviously sometimes there has been times where you announce it and the participation is poor, then you build up some rewards to attract those participation, like you do surveys. First few ideas will get this much of reward and all those things. So you need to keep changing the practice. You want to improve the culture, so you need to come up with innovative ideas to make it work for you.
Excellent. Thanks for that, Amit. Martine, anything to add there from your perspective?
I mean, the only other one that I've used quite frequently is I utilize Microsoft Forms. You
Yeah.
can do a anonymous version on there as well. That's great for any of the employees that are working on or have access to the computers during their workday. Not as great for the hands-on employees who are down like on the production floor. So again, I agree with Amit though, you got to use your best judgment and then also find what works for your team members. And the other thing is don't be afraid to ask them. Sometimes I think we always think we need to have all the answers, but just ask your staff, how would you like to submit feedback? And
Yeah.
sometimes they'll give you the answer.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's a good rule to follow. Question open for anyone. Do you discipline or have to terminate an employee for their safety mindset or for actual incidences? Well, I know what my answer would be, but I'll let my panelists go for this one.
Uh, Obviously, you have to follow the procedure. Yeah, if it's beyond that procedure, then you need to take action because you are in charge of creating a safe workplace. But always there are warning letters, talk, sit, understand, build trust, and if give a warning letter, and if that doesn't happen, give it a chance. And if unfortunately if the employee is not fit for your organization, he is not fit. Maybe there is a some other place waiting for him, but you need to follow your because you are setting up an example. And if you tolerate that employee, obviously then it it creates a kind of a environment. If he or she has been led to do this thing, it catches up, like everyone else will think the same way, and things are going into the opposite direction, which you don't want to expect.
I think it's not a yes or no answer. It's not black or white. There's a lot of shades of gray here, which anytime people are involved, I think usually that is. So depending on the situation would kind of lead to that. Was it a severe violation where historically that employee has been talked to, discussed, and it's been documented in the past that they have clearly violated safety protocols? Well, then maybe you are leaning towards more that now you're at a justified termination position. Is this somebody who's new and this is their first big mistake that they've made? Did we give them the tools and resources though to be successful? Because I know for myself, I don't think it's fair to hold an employee accountable if I haven't given them the tools to be successful, because then their failure is not on them. That's on me, that I didn't provide them with that resource. And then to the second part of that question is about their mindset. I think mindset is so important with employees. You can teach an employee with an open and growth mindset, you can teach them anything. They'll be eager to learn. So about the safety, about the roles, and you can help that employee blossom. If you have an employee who has a very closed-minded mindset, to me, that's an employee who no longer wants to grow in that company. And I think that is a much bigger problem because those kind of employees, you can give them every tool and resource available. But if they don't even have that slight openness to learning, you're not going to get anywhere with them. And then at that point, I might be looking at, is this employee a good fit for our culture? Are they positively like influencing our culture, or are they negatively impacting it? And then you might have to make those tough calls.
These are great, both good answers. And I would just, and I challenge CEOs and leaders all the time, is if you've got that disruptor, right? They're a great worker. They know a ton. They've been here a long time, but they're a major disruptor, meaning they doesn't matter what you do, they will not change their safety mindset. Are you willing to make that tough call? If nothing else can be changed, are you willing? And it's interesting where some struggle with that, that tough call because it will be a major disruption to the organization. But you have to think of what's happening to your culture in behind all that. And so it doesn't seem like it's what I call the silent killer, but it can obviously be the very much the cancer that kills below the surface. So just be mindful of that. And I agree, Martine. It's a lot of shades of gray there. There's a lot of shades of gray there. So great answers. Thank you. Comment from another folks joining us today. We are not managing production. We are managing people. There's a big difference. Any other thoughts on that they would like to know?
Well,
Absolutely.
yeah, go ahead, Martine.
Sorry, Steve, to steal your thunder.
Ah,
I think that's a great statement, is you're not managing the production, you're managing the people. And if you want your production to be successful, you need to invest in your employees so that they can be successful, because they're the ones who are on the ground on the day-to-day basis, building the equipment or whichever industry that you're in. And without them, you don't have production. And I think sometimes um, leaders, CEOs, people can forget about that our employees and our people are the biggest asset that we have to our company. It's what makes your company you. It's also what makes you unique and improves that culture. And if you're not taking that time to invest in those employees, whether it's by providing additional training, recognition. I mean, there's so many times I've stepped into a role or gone to visit somewhere and been shocked at the lack of acknowledgement people get, so that when you give them that slight little, hey, great job, their eyes light up like they've never heard it before, or they've never been told that they're intelligent or they're smart and I can't do their roles. So, I mean, of course they are. So, yeah, I think that's a very fair and true statement that you are managing the people. And if you do that correctly and properly, and you individualize it to every member that you can, your production will greatly benefit from that.
Great. Yeah,
Mhm,
that's a
mhm.
great answer. Steve, your
Yeah.
thoughts?
Well, I mean, Martine has stolen all of my thunder, which is wonderful. But I think, we also, we're not widgets. We come into work every single day. We have a context outside of work. We have demands, and we have stressors, and we have relationships, and we have responsibilities. And when employers forget that aspect of the person and just focus on them as just I don't know, I'm going to sound like a Marxist, but a unit of production, we can't build trust, because we have to see them as human beings. Human beings who, you know, everybody aspires to go home and care for the people that they love. And we need to make sure that we're giving them enough energy at the end of the day to do that, so that they can go home and then meet those responsibilities, because that way they come back to work the next day ready to invest in the organization, right? So we have to see people as whole individuals, because if we don't, that trust disappears.
I wanted to add to that. I mean, I think the other part we have to look at is that humans are not commodities, right? And if we do look at it from a commodity level, I mean, we are scarcely running out of people. We have more boomers retiring every single day. We have more people leaving the workforce than entering the workforce. This is a problem. And so if you want to talk about a commodity that's getting scarce, it's people, finding good people that want to come and work in your organizations. If you're unsafe, if you're psychologically unsafe, if you don't think that your Glassdoor reviews matter, Martine, they matter, don't they?
Oh,
Right?
absolutely.
All those forms matter. If you're an unsafe worker or a workforce, if you don't think that those reviews matter, they do. And so we need to make sure we take care of our biggest asset, which is our people inside our organizations. We want to lower the attrition. We want to keep them healthy. We want to keep them safe. I think there's so much more we could say about this, but I just it's one of those things that we have to manage our workforce well. Not the well, production has to be managed well too, but definitely our people. I got another question here. I like this. What has been the most meaningful feedback you've received from a team member and implemented? That goes out to anyone. Could be anything, right? How about cocktails on Fridays? No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, mocktails. My apologies. Anything?
Uh, Again, when lots of feedbacks we get, how to make our processes more efficient and more safe, I would say. How to, like, whether it's during the bending of the parts, do we need some lift jacks or some those kind of tool which can avoid those uh, awkward procedure or ergonomics, whether it's in an office. Like, feedbacks are, again, part of culture is to have those feedbacks and implement those feedbacks and see the uh, analyze those ones. Like a simple thing, we get some big angles from our customer, and they have to be unloaded on a carts. We made those carts ourselves. Four guys are driving those carts, and suddenly one of our employees, who is a part of safety committee member, he recalled, "Oh no, I was working in a XYZ organization, and this was the thing which they were doing it. They got these specialized cards for those angles and the pipes, and that helps or that reduces all those ergonomics challenges we were having, the material handling." So, and immediately we look into those, invested in those, and yeah, four guys doing those things and just getting tired after pulling all those cards. They were happy. Now two guys are doing all the stuff. So if we are not following or if we are not working on those feedbacks or the suggestions we are getting, I think suddenly it becomes a non-norm. Oh, whatsoever we give them, whatsoever we write them, nothing is going to happen. So we need to act continuously and evaluate each and every feedback we get. That can make one small improvement can make a big difference.
Thanks for
I
that.
think that's great. I was able to think of one during that time. This was actually a recent one that came from, again, one of those little informal talks I had with an employee he's a longstanding employee who's been here probably 15, 16 years or so by now. We had a little bit of a issue on our production, somebody coming to pick up a piece of equipment and last minute notice. There was just something off that was just a little bit off there. And he took it upon himself to prioritize getting that fix done so that, the customer could get their product like ASAP, get it out the door and made him happy. And so he went above and pushed out the rest of his day to make sure that got done really quickly, like before anyone really even asked him to. And it was another employee who mentioned it to me that so and so did this and they did it without even being asked. So during one of my little walks, I went down and found him where he's sitting at his workstation and I just mentioned it to him. I said, "Hey, that's really great that what you just did. It so and so noticed it, brought it to my attention, and I just wanted to let you know like that was a great job." And he lets me know, he goes, "You know what? Don't tell people, but maybe I'm a company guy after all." And hearing that from a long-standing employee who you very rarely get that much buy-in from,
Yeah.
I knew that I had helped create a culture where he wanted to step up. He wants to see the company succeed. He's not just there to punch in and punch out like maybe people previously thought. And hearing him even vocalize that, I think just really it had quite a big impression for me, probably more than he realized. So.
Mhm.
That's great. I like the examples. So I have lots, but I want to keep going to the questions here just because we do have a few more to get through. Um, this is a tough one, but maybe we can try to give an answer. We struggle with a situation where our organizational structure consists of a number of remote facilities where we have young entry-level workforce, many of which this may represent their first job. We struggle to hear and connect regularly with these groups of folks. What can we do during onboarding or during employment to empower these folks to speak up and provide us with feedback? So you got this diverse workforce. How do you how do you get more feedback from those when you don't have that regular contact? I think is what the person's really asking about from an onboard or even after onboarding.
And so it sounds like it's more of it's like a kind of a virtual, like people are scattered around in different locations. Is
Well, I
kind
think
of.
you got plants in different locations, and
Mhm.
this is where they're, not able to be in those locations all the time to create feedback, create trust, create that walk around. So how are you going to get that? It's a great question.
So I think with that, if we're talking about people working in just different plants, not just entirely remotely,
Yeah.
I think this really goes to that team environment that you need is
Yeah.
if I can't be there myself, well, then I need a team of people to be there. So maybe that is, let's say you have three different locations. Well, you need three different people in those locations, at least, if not more, who have been trained and worked closely with you to understand like the priorities and everything to creating that culture. And you need to have them there, and you need to trust that you're can delegate those tools over to those other people and that they're able to make those connections and relations. And then
Yeah.
on top of it is scheduling those consistent feedbacks with that employee who is working at a different plant so that they feel involved because it's hard when you can't be there for sure. You don't know what's going on behind closed doors or sometimes you don't hear the chit chatter at the water cooler about what people are concerned about. But if you have someone who can be there on your behalf, then I think that's a really great tool for it.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
couldn't agree more. I mean, this is where you got to really invest in those remote teams to have somebody that you've all ultimately is going to be your voice and kind of run that, organization similarly so, at a satellite. to how you would if you were there. And then also have a good rapport and relationship and communication back so that if you hear of things that are maybe going off in the wrong direction, you can strategize on how to deal with that. Or worst case, you have to go up yourself to kind of,
Yeah.
corral that team, right? Because, I've worked with a lot of remote groups, organization throughout North America, and you just can't physically be there, right? It's pretty tough. And so I agree with you, Martine. You've got to really create that trust within that and set that foundation around those expectations and how they mirror what you do in your location in that location. So I would,
Yeah, but and part of that is, yeah, I mean, you can't be there, but you need to step up the visibility, because even when you have teams that are, you have the right people, teams can drift. So you have to make sure that you're stepping up your visibility, going out there, making regular pilgrimages to each site, to make sure that we're keeping that culture alive and keeping it unified and keeping the same strategic vision. But all like these teams that Martine is talking about, you also have to get those folks communicating with their counterparts in other parts of the organization, because it's very easy to have drift.
yeah,
Right. And then what are the mechanisms that you use, again, just to get the employees in all these organizations feeling like they're connected to the larger organization? Because it'd be very easy to think that we're all part of organization X, but I'm over here in this siloed area, and this is what I identify more with. We need to make sure that communication goes on, that culture building, so they feel like they're part of the larger organization. So online newsletters, for example, making regular opportunities for employees to get together, having virtual lunch and learns or virtual meetings where people can join together as part of the bigger group. All of those help create culture, because culture is not in the walls. It's
right.
not in the logo. It's the efforts that we make to make sure that we're all going in the same direction.
Perfect. Meet, I don't know if you had anything to add to that, but if not, I'm going to go to just a
Uh, I
couple
would
questions.
just say, when obviously I don't have a experience with this thing, so
Yeah.
I just kept myself. But what Martin and Steve said, we do have a sister organization, and they have multiple offices all across Canada. And obviously, that's what they have mentioned in our meetings, is the person who is responsible for that particular location plays an important role. Um, and he's our champion over there. You can't be everywhere. You need to have eyes and ears over the all the places, and you have the right person at the right spot, the things are much easier for you.
Yes, we need good leaders. Listening. Great. I'm going to go to this question. This is so we talked about the disruptors that may be employee based, but what do you do or what can one do if the business owner is the disruptor? Does anyone want to tackle that one? Can you fire the owner? No, I'm sorry, I didn't say that. I mean, but how do you deal with that? Where, this person, I'll give you an example. I know where just recently we've had an owner, walk into the plant and, you know, maybe not wearing the proper PPE, the equipment may not have the proper safety equipment on it, right? And again, is that owner exempt? Does if that owner or that CEO, do they get a hall pass on it? Because again, this is going to be the whole disruption of whether you can create a culture or not. Because if the leadership at the top isn't walking the talk, then the rest of the team kind of doesn't feel that that is a priority, right? Curious if there's any remarks that you might have around this. I have a few, but I want to hear from our panelists.
I would say that puts employees in a really difficult position, right? Because, employees, you can have the most motivated, open-minded employee, and they're typically the ones that you actually risk losing the best ones when you have leadership that's not role modeling, right? And I think what you end up seeing in organizations like that, I mean, they can go along for quite a while, but there's not the natural consequences are increased injuries, higher, retention problems, those negative Glassdoor reviews. So, I mean, even though, the costs inevitably will come,
Yep.
But again, I think it goes back to Martine's point, before about the open and closed mindset. If somebody has a closed mindset, it's very difficult to change that, even particularly if they're the CEO. That's a tough one.
I agree a lot with what Steve was saying there. And just to build a little bit further on that, again, that is an impossible challenging position to be in. And I think it really depends also on how involved is this owner on the day-to-day or the CEO. For myself personally, no one's above safety. So, I mean, a lot of people aren't going to want to hear it, but I'm going to tell him to put the PPE on. But then the other thing is finding a way to relay your message to that person in a way that they receive it. I mean, maybe the business owner, he doesn't really care for HR. Okay, well, that's why I'm here. So I want to talk to him like I'm the expert in my field. And if he doesn't want to hear about the people side of it because it just doesn't resonate with him, well, I'm sure money talks. So then maybe building off what Steve was saying about how expensive these injuries could be, or losing highly skilled and intelligent staff and having to rehire. It's expensive to hire staff. Even your entry level production worker, it's costing usually a couple $1,000s after you run ads, interviews, everything like that. So if that CEO or business owner isn't going to listen to the humane side of me talking, well, then maybe I need to adjust myself into similar as I do to all my employees, into a way that maybe he's more likely to hear it. And a lot of times it's money, to be honest. So, and then if he won't from there, or they won't from there, then I might pause and think about the same thing. Is that's a closed mindset. And I think that is a very toxic mindset to have in a work environment, especially stemming right from like an owner or a CEO. So I think there's definitely some large issues there.
Yeah. I say attrition kills you. It will kill your brand. It will kill your business because you can't just, people will start to leave. If they don't believe that this is a psychological safe place, if they don't believe that the owner is invested in safety to them as an individual, I believe that, and to Steve's point, in time, and I've seen it. I've seen where I've had owners that were not invested. They weren't necessarily always very present, so it was a bit different. But we did have the undertone of the negativity that an owner's behavior kind of leached into the culture of the organization, and over time, it just became this attrition windmill that we just couldn't seem to get off of, and then eventually, even I left the organization. So it is something that'll affect you, whether it's now or down the road. And to your point, it will affect you also from a claims cost, because if something happens, that could be quite a major cost, and in fact, in some cases, could put you right out of business. So. I don't think it's something we can ignore. Amit, I want to give you an opportunity to answer on that, and then I'm going to have to
Uh,
close this up.
I would say I have been very fortunate working in this Canadian environment. I haven't seen something like this. Whosoever my network is, I have seen clear role models there. But if I go back to my 16 years or back there, 8 years of my career back into my country, yes, I have seen those things. And those things are short term. They are short term. They are not long term thought process. Yes, you can, like I started with profit or safety first. So one of our quotes you might have heard: if you take care of your people, people will take care of your customers. So again, coming back to the thing, yes, you can do a business. You can not follow any of the rules you made, but is that long-term thinking? Are you building up an organization, or are you just running an organization for just short period of time and you have some other plans? You can't just accidents. How you can compliance with the regulations? How you can have a employee retention and morale there? How you can have a lower cost? How can you have a lower reduced workplace incident? So all these things come into picture. So anyone, I think they should be thinking if from a long term and a big picture, it's not going to survive. And in this age and day and age, where so much of opportunities are available. Who wants to work in that workplace where they feel they are not safe anymore?
Great. Well, you guys have given a lot of feedback and really great examples. And I really want to thank our panelists for joining us today. Amit, Martine, and Steve, you did a great job. And no one would know this would maybe be your first MSABC webinar. So thank you so much for taking time and joining us. You guys did a great job. So thank you again.